Welcome to an exciting edition of the new and improved Learning Matters podcast. My name is Rachel, and I'm a production assistant here at Learning Matters. Recently, I had the opportunity to learn about EGFI, engineering. Go for it. They're an outreach program for the American Society for Engineering Education. EGFI has developed an interactive, kid-friendly website, an award-winning magazine, as well as a student blog aimed at promoting and enhancing the efforts to improve K-12 STEM and engineering education. I spoke with the co-directors of EGFI, Stacey Harrison and Dennis Cummings, as well as Mary Lord, the associate editor of EGFI's Teachers Newsletter, to discuss their website, magazine, and some misconceptions students have about engineering. Make sure to stick around at the end of the podcast for some more information on this organization and to hear about what we have coming up here at Learning Matters. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Let's begin with you telling me a little bit about who you are and the ideas and goals behind EGFI's mission, magazine, and website.
My name is Dennis Cummings. I'm the co-director of the outreach program, and we work for the American Society for Engineering Education, which is a nonprofit membership society of engineering professors and deans. And so our goal with the project was to generate some awareness around engineering and to excite more kids to consider studying engineering in college.
Yeah, basically we realized that there's a huge problem in the United States that kids just didn't know what engineering was. They weren't considering engineering as a career, particularly women and minorities. And so we started this magazine with just the idea of explaining to kids what engineering is, how engineers make a difference in the world, and just showing all the societal benefits that engineers create. So that was the basic starting point. And we started with a magazine, and then a couple of years ago we developed a website. And so our website's huge. I don't know how much of it you've seen, but there's a site for students, there's a site for teachers, there's things really for kids of all ages. The main homepage is meant to just be a fun introduction to all the different disciplines of engineering. Like I said, most kids don't even know what engineering is, let alone that there are all these different disciplines. So really our site works for kids of all ages. The homepage is perfect for, late elementary to middle school. Even high school kids can sort of be entertained while they learn about the different types of engineering. And then if you go through our site, you can find out more about college and what classes you need to take for engineering school and so forth.
So to build off that a little bit, there are obviously a lot of misconceptions about what engineers do, and your magazine definitely tries to break down the different disciplines and career options. What do you think are some of the most common misconceptions, and how do you try to combat those?
Most kids, as I said a moment ago, don't even know what engineering is, so they're not going to decide that that's what they want to be when they grow up. Is a big problem we're having in America. Many students are not choosing to study engineering in college, particularly, as Stacey said, women and minorities. Currently, women are only about 18% of the bachelor's degrees awarded for engineering, and they're much higher in just about every other discipline across the board.
The misconceptions about engineering, we've talked to students who think that an engineer is the guy that fixes the water heater and they're the ones that drive the trains, or if they have any idea, maybe they fix something electrical. So the idea is to show how engineers make a difference in the world. You may notice on every card there's a way that particular engineer makes a difference. So we wanted to show, how the world is improved through engineering. And I think a lot of kids think that people who are engineers are, they're white, they're, kind of nerdy looking, and we really make a point of showing, I'll even say attractive engineers on the young side to try to encourage kids to maybe see themselves in some of these people. So you notice the students, they come from a diverse background. They're corresponding videos online, and they're very inspirational to listen to. A student will be able to hear someone who sort of looks like them talk about why they want to be an engineer, and we think that is really the way to excite a kid about engineering. So on our site, we also have this whole Trailblazers section, which are young engineers who are already making a difference in the world. Maybe they've already invented something, or they've done something already with their lives. And again, it's a very diverse group. So that was really the core mission or core thing we wanted to push with this.
I know a lot of your work focuses on the different career paths in the field of engineering. What types of things can students and teachers work on now in the classroom to prepare and experiment with different engineering concepts?
Well, we do have a teacher skill. We have activities and lessons for teachers, and actually a lot of homeschoolers, parents use it also. And also people that do outreach in schools will go to our site to look for an activity to do in the school. So Mary Lord, who's our editor of our teacher newsletter, is here with us, and perhaps she can, Mary, you want to talk about the teacher site a little bit?
So basically, we have a weekly newsletter that goes out. It will have a theme, like chemical engineering, or recently we featured with Puss in Boots being launched, the computer graphics and all the fun stuff engineers are doing in Hollywood. And then we will have an activity or a lesson in this that is tied to that theme. So we're trying to get sort of some, what might be newsy in the classroom connected with what is available and easy to do in your classroom that is engineering related. And the feedback has been pretty good, but essentially what we're trying to say is engineering isn't in addition to, it's not another burden that you're doing. It's something that you can do to enhance science or math or literacy with your students. And it just happens to be an engineering theme. So, so for example, the Hollywood lesson was a little bit about physics and the center of gravity, but the bulk of it was about how do you write a realistic action sort of storyline. And so it brings in all these things, and we relate them to learning standards so teachers can see that they are essentially hitting the standards that they are supposed to get their kids to know and be able to do, but they're doing it through engineering.
Yeah. So that kind of hits on, the value of real-life experiences in teaching engineering, kind of garnering that relatability.
Yeah, real-life engineering, and also I think one of the core components is just the physical feel for this discipline, doing hands-on, open-ended projects. There is no right answer. The teacher doesn't have an answer in the back of his or her book, and so essentially it's a discovery for everybody, and it builds some of these so-called 21st century skills apart from the math, the science, of brainstorming, of learning from failure, of improving on a product design, of working in diverse teams. And those are, and communications, oh my goodness, communications is in there too. And none of these things are ever really explicit in a lot of the classroom activities and lessons and curriculum that teachers are expected to cover with their kids. But engineering is a fun way and a hands-on way to kind of get them to mix it up with each other and, maybe even learn some core concepts.
How do you think the increasing access to technology in the classroom has changed the way engineering concepts are taught and demonstrated?
I don't think you need to have technology necessarily to learn engineering concepts. There certainly is a lot of technology that teachers and students can download for free these days. There's all kinds of software, how to, make a robot or build a bridge, or there's a lot of stuff you can do online, certainly, and teachers can pull up our website and our magazine in their classroom, so smartboards would be valuable for that. I think a lot of engineering is really a lot of stuff on our site are these activities that are not so high tech. You can use spaghetti and a marshmallow and some tape, and you can come up with a really great engineering lesson teaching kids the engineering design process. So I think technology has a role, and it can be a nice add-on, but it's not necessary. Mary, did you want to add to that?
True, and just again back to the Hollywood special effects. There are a number of companies and universities where there is free downloadable programs that will allow students to demonstrate what they learned in a different way than, say, a full bubble pencil and paper test or a worksheet. They could make an animation. They can do a YouTube video. I'm sure teachers all over the country are doing very imaginative things with smartphones. And the other thing that technology enables is communications with other teachers who are incorporating engineering in their classrooms, and more specifically with the colleges of engineering that are doing enormous amounts of outreach efforts, everything from engineering students running after-school programs to engineering faculty members training individual teachers, every teacher in a school, even county-wide public school systems you're seeing these very interesting partnerships. Mm-hmm. And increasingly, professional development and training of teachers is going online. And then, of course, if you're in a well-resourced school like a STEM academy, you can maybe see some of those 3D printers or architectural computer-assisted design programs. So the students are getting much more than just the simple hands-on activities. They're really getting a feel for how a real architect or civil engineer would be using the tools of the trade.
I know the U.S. is perceived as falling behind in math and sciences, particularly when it comes to women and minority groups. Why do you think that is?
This is just my personal opinion.
Please.
Based on reporting about education and having raised two children almost through high school. But part of the issue may be how I don't know if it's unique to the United States, but the vast majority of our elementary schools have elementary teachers who are supposed to teach science, math, English, poetry, hygiene, physical education, you name it. And almost none of those teachers, as sensible as they are, as steeped in the pedagogy, as concerned and loving of kids as they are, almost none of them have a math or a science background. That may have been okay, but then there's this subsequent effect that when you have, since No Child Left Behind focuses on reading and math in 3rd through 8th grade, and again in 10th grade, science doesn't count for the measure of schools. To see that curricula, and these are studies, this is not just me talking, but right. Studies by the Education Policy Institute and other nonpartisan groups, you see the curriculum narrowing. So the school day is full of literacy blocks and numeracy blocks, and art and music and science in particular are squeezed out. So the bedrock for kids to be involved with and engaged by math and science is sort of falling short in the U.S. in a way that does not seem to be taking place in nations across the country. And then I think if you add to that the whole idea that math and science is scary or it's for nerds, by the time a kid reaches middle school, which is where research suggests students make up their mind about what they want to be when they grow up, or even if they'll drop out of school, to not see that whole part of their lives as something they might be interested in doing, again, steers them into probably more of the humanities. That's maybe where they feel successful. That's where there's more time spent on it. And then the sort of the triple whammy is when they get to university, and let's say you've got some students who are interested in the first place. We do our best to kind of squeeze the life out of it. It's sort of like you only get to do the fun stuff after you've gone through all the math and science. But we would never say that. Like if a kid said, boy, I want to be a doctor when I grow up, we don't say, oh, well, you need 4 years of math and science before you can even think of enrolling in medical school. Sure. We say, great, we need more doctors, go for it. So I think from my perspective as somebody who does the teacher's newsletter and writes about engineering education, I feel we're in this wonderful sort of critical mass of attention to engineering, math and science. The President of the United States has called on the country to graduate 10,000 more engineers and 100,000 more teachers in science, math, technology, and engineering. And so given that sort of call from on high, same call being echoed by the business community, And now this idea that engineering can be fun and benefit society, I sense that there is potential at least to change the conversation. And our efforts at EGFI hopefully will help reframe engineering as a viable, fun, and terribly engaging career path for our kids.
And I certainly didn't know in high school what engineering was and what disciplines were involved. I mean, everything kind of just got lumped into this general category of science.
For me too. No, I didn't know what an engineer was until I got to college, and I had a friend who was studying engineering. So it means a lot to me to be able to show kids, even elementary school kids, for them to hear the word engineering and maybe connect it to their iPod or the 3D movie or the Angry Birds game they like to play. I mean, for them to see that these are the people that create these things, that it's in their world that they love, or the cool cars. My son loves cars, and just to be able to have the kids make that kind of connection, I think, is really important.
Can you think of any specific examples of innovative projects happening in schools now that you think are just really on the right track in terms of getting kids familiar with engineering now?
I'm certainly seeing, and you probably are too, every day there's a ribbon being cut on some new STEM academy or some STEM magnet school. So there's definitely a lot happening. But for example, there's a program that brings science educators from around the country to be Einstein Fellows in Washington, usually in the National Science Foundation and other government agencies, but also on Capitol Hill and in the halls of Congress. And these are just an amazing group of educators. They are just free thinking. No one ever told them it was possible to do stuff. And so one of the fellows I interviewed a couple of months ago, Mike Town, comes from a relatively suburban/rural community in Washington. Avid outdoors person, kind of old Peace Corps kind of guy, does a lot of work with his hands, and he has sort of incorporated sustainability and environmental engineering into his science courses. They build like a Habitat for Humanity house. They build they do a lot of hands-on projects. And one day, literally riding his off-road mountain bike in the woods, he's been mulling, he said, how to cut the carbon, how to reduce the carbon footprint of communities, of his school, of his town. And it suddenly hits on them that the biggest sort of carbon footprint maker of most suburban or rural communities is the public high school. Mm-hmm. It brings in a lot of kids from around the region. It, has a big power plant. It houses a lot of people in one building. And so out of that sort of revelation, he developed something that has turned into the Cool Schools Challenge. And it basically started just with talking about sustainability and carbon footprints and drawing on the students' interest in preserving the environment. The students themselves started doing things like forcing their parents to carpool. And eventually, after about a year or two, probably 2 years, the school district was saving $30,000 for utilities.
That's incredible.
So it was a multidisciplinary effort that got at a whole lot of benefits, both from the learning and teaching standpoint, but also from the clear economic benefits. And the most interesting thing is that through the classroom instruction, eventually it made a huge difference in the way that school and the way that community, including the parents and the businesses around the school, operated. Mm-hmm. So but is that a program? Can you stick it up there and say, buy this textbook and this lesson plan and no. But what teachers and schools and districts can do is go on and look at the Healthy Schools Challenge and take it themselves. Mm-hmm. And there's now a network of schools doing that nationwide. And, whether it's improving test scores or not, who knows? But from the evidence, it's pretty clear that the students are really engaged in learning and with their community in a very, if it was just between the walls of a school, and done for 45 minutes with a pencil and paper exercise.
Another innovative program that incorporates engineering that we've heard about, there's a school in Boston, I think it was called the Jesuit Academy, where they built a green roof on top of their school, and that integrated many different types of math, science, all the STEM disciplines to create this green roof on their school where they're actually now growing food that they serve in the cafeteria at the school.
Yeah.
Boston Latin has something
Boston
like that.
Latin, that's what it's called.
Yeah, the New York public schools have something like that too, where they start up these community gardens, and then the kids take the basil from the garden and make pesto in the school cafeteria.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I just love that. Because it really gets the kids involved, and it just shows them how they can make an impact on their community right away. A lot of times I think kids don't feel the grown-ups are the ones that rule the world, but when you empower a child, give them the power to make a difference. I think that really makes the connections happen in the child's mind.
Another innovative program I think we should mention is from our member of ASCE's K-12 division. Her name is Elizabeth Perry, and she works for North Carolina State University. Mm-hmm. She's been working with some underserved public schools in North Carolina where they've taken a curriculum that was created by the Boston Museums of Science. It's called Engineering is Elementary. Mm-hmm. And this is, evidence that she's presented at our conference where they've seen incredible increases in the test scores from the students who are enrolled in this program. And they've integrated engineering throughout the K through 5 curriculum, which sounds really surprising when you think about K, that's kindergarten. But they're teaching kids about the engineering design process and how to solve problems and think creatively at a really young age. And it's been able to be self-effective when you look at the test scores of these kids.
Yeah, that's the kind of partnership I was talking about, where you have typically a passionate, seasoned engineering educator at the College of Engineering, partnering very deeply with individual schools, school districts, to train the teachers to write the curriculum or train the teachers on how to use. And so you see a lot of that, and engineering will probably look very different in the different communities. Mm-hmm. So for a rural school to have a green roof, when they're in the middle of the farm belt, that may be fine. They may do a rain garden, but they also may do a very specific agricultural engineering project. And then the other thing I probably should have mentioned is the National Research Council, which is the research arm of the National Academies of Science, recently published a framework for the next generation of science and engineering standards. And engineering and the design process is specifically mentioned in there. It's a theme, it's a strand. So currently only Massachusetts identifies engineering and technology as a separate strand within its science framework, science standards. But assuming there will be the same kind of energy around next generation science standards as there was around the Common Core English and math standards, which are now the law of the land in 45 states. Montana just signed on, and the District of Columbia. States, school districts, everyone is going to be hearing more about engineering. It will be expected of the students. So efforts like EGFI are kind of in that, I won't say cutting edge, but we're I think, to prepare the groundwork that will allow for the fruitful introduction of engineering when it becomes mandated.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this edition of the Learning Matters podcast. If you'd like more information on EGFI and what they're up to, you can visit the podcast section of the Learning Matters website at learningmatters.tv. Coming soon to the podcast series, our web producer, Ted Bauer, speaks with Northwestern University Professor Alan Cummings about his recent book, Rethinking Education in the Age of Technology. That's all for now. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful day.